Welcome back to Empowered K-12. I'm your host, Alana Pinkley, and today I'm joined by Mike Garcia for a conversation about holistic school safety, leadership, and what it takes to build better learning environments. Good morning, Mike. Thanks for joining us today. Let's just start by getting to know you.
Sure.
Can you share a little bit more about your journey into K-12 school safety and what drives you in this work?
Absolutely. I'll make it brief. I was in government cybersecurity and had just kind of semi-retired. And I want to say that Columbine kind of grabbed me and shook me and said, the government has the expertise in securing people, facilities, and assets and securing America's secrets. That's what they do. And that's what I had been doing for 15 years. Schools don't have that. Columbine was a perfect example. And so dovetailing that into the next big event that happened, Virginia Tech, I said, you know what? Enough is enough. So between Columbine and Virginia Tech, I started doing my research. I started looking at what schools had, what they didn't have. And I said, you know what? This is the bird nest on the ground. If you're looking for an analogy, we want to inject our knowledge and our past performance into what they're doing to try to get them to understand risk management, assessing risk, mitigating risk, and managing risk. And we want to inject that into these schools. That's what prompted me to get into the school safety and security space. And after that, it became a passion because all the people that I talked to wanted to make a difference. They wanted to do these things, but there was no money, no resources. No was the word. It's been 26 years since Columbine, right? It's 26 years. It's an age of a grown adult with children. And nothing, in my opinion, has gotten us closer to being able to manage the risk at a school district. And that's what I do on a daily basis. That's what I wake up doing. That's what I go to sleep doing, is helping schools understand how to manage risk. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made a really good point too about how it has been 26 years since Columbine, and we've implemented all of these new initiatives and, school building hardening and just vendors with different products, and we're still seeing the same outcomes. So I'm excited just to dive into a little bit more about this topic of holistic school safety, because I feel like it's something that can really lead us in the right direction on, what school safety is going to look like in the future.
Absolutely. If you think about the why, right? Why are you here? Why am I here? Why are people watching and listening to this podcast? I boil it down into a dictionary word or lack thereof, right? So if you think about a wife that loses a husband, there's a word for that. You look it up in the dictionary and it's widow, right? A husband that loses a wife is a widower. A child who loses their parents, there's a word for that. It's an orphan. But there's no word in the English dictionary for a parent that loses a child. Doesn't exist. You can look it up all day long. It is so horrible. It is such a horrible event. It's not even thought of. You don't even want to think about it. So there's no word for it. And that's what I bring all this back to. And I say, you know what? We have to get to zero. We have to do something about this. And most of this is local, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Can't depend on anybody. We've got to embrace this and do it ourselves. And that's what holistic, in my opinion, that's what holistic means. It means bringing it in layers all the way down to you.
In your opinion, how do you balance the physical side of school safety, with the cameras and the locks, with the emotional and mental and relational aspects of a campus?
That's a great question. And there's two parts to that answer. The first one is there's resources out there that can help any school safety director do their job based on leading practices, right? What does not exist is standards, requirements, mandates, right? There's nothing for a school to get into and say, we have to do these things based on these federal requirements, right? The DOD has to do it. The federal government has to do it. Energy companies have to do it. Banks have to do it. School districts do not. There's nothing out there that says is a mandated requirement for safety and security, and we will be audited on this federally. If we do not do it, we will be reprimanded in this way. There's no consequences. There's nothing. So what we did was, and what the real answer is looking for some organizations that are able to provide you with the information necessary to provide a layered security, defense in depth, a tiered security approach, and then put this all together just like an orchestra. Think orchestra, think Lego. So the first thing is to pass K-12 standards, right? So pass K-12 is your North Star to point to and say, hey, this is where we are now. This is where PASS says we should be as a tier 2 school, as a tier 3 school. And this is how we have to get there. This is the amount of money it's going to require us to get there. And that is your safety plan, goes to your safety committee, and that gets presented to the school board. So now you have a leg to stand on and you have the PASS guidelines to point to, but you also have an organization that you can go and get a certificate in the fundamentals of school security leadership, which is the National Council for School Security Directors. HID, the company that I work for, has a scholarship that we have provided for school security directors that apply. 1,000 school security directors will receive a scholarship from HID, and it allows them to go in and get certified, get a certificate from the National Council for School Security Directors, and apply that to their school district safety and security plan. So now when you go into your security committee, your safety committee, you can say, hey, these are the people here that should be receiving this certificate, that should go to these classes. And now we can have a better view of not only what to buy and where to place it, but what the risk assessment says that we need to do, which is the first step in the journey of 1,000,000 miles is your risk assessment, right? But before the risk assessment, downloading the PASS guidelines and doing what I just said. So there's a methodology to it. There's a step-by-step process. I won't get into it as much right now because there's so much to it. But please go to PASS.org, download the guidelines, or go to the National Council for School Safety Directors, NCSSD.org. Put your plan together first. And then when you get to your safety committee at your school, you've got a cross section of the entire district and you put that in place with them. It is very tough because you have mental health, and mental health is health. You've got your healthcare directors or your nurses, and the school safety director is the orchestrator, is the conductor, and you're conducting woodwinds, brass, and percussion, and you're having them play on a sheet of music that directs them towards a safer school, a safer learning environment, but also an environment where kids do not have to use violence to express their emotions. So that's, to answer your question, that's how you do it. It's just the same way that you create a beautiful piece of music. Because if you think about it, if you have just the woodwinds and you say, hey, flutes, play this for me, nobody really understands what that is. Nobody can listen to the music now and say, I love it, unless you're a flute player. But you take all three of these together and you bring them in, and the flutes play that same piece, but we're playing it together. And now you have something that you can hang your hat on and say, this is where we need to be. And it follows leading practices. It follows the PASS guidelines. It follows the National Council for School Safety Directors, zeronow.org, Path to Safer Schools. And then when ASIS standards hit and you have something to comply with, finally, as a school district, you already have your foot in the door.
Yeah, I think that's a really great analogy too for the tiered approach to school security. And I'll make sure to put those links you mentioned in the description so our listeners can go through and check out those resources.
With what I just mentioned, now you can associate that to ANSI code. And I attribute this to Guy Blisner, who's the state of Idaho Department of Education came up with this. He said, the ASIS standards are the plumbing code that the plumbers have to comply with. So you take the ASIS school safety standards, associate them to the ANSI plumbing code, and then you say, okay, PASS is the handbook for plumbers. It's the handbook that the plumbers are using based on that code. And NCSSD is the training and certificate for those plumbers that are doing the work. Makes total sense. And now schools have something that they can actually not only point to, but actually apply in a handbook format to keep their schools more safe and more secure.
Do you have like a real world example where you helped a school district implement a holistic safety strategy, or have you worked with someone who maybe implemented one that you'd like to share?
Oh, I've implemented hundreds. And I guess the one that really hits home the most is, you know how when you're invited to a meeting and they say you sit at a table and you look around and you can't spot the fool, or you're the fool. So my first meeting to accomplish this was with a superintendent who invited me to a meeting. I show up and there's a table full of people. So I said, you know what? I'm going to have to come out and I'm going to have to assist them in understanding what this is all about, why I'm here, because they're looking at me like I've got, three heads. So I said, guys, before we introduce ourselves, I want to make sure that I have my information correct. And so I took my book and I said, this is the group that created the risk assessment for your district? Yes. Oh, yeah, we did a risk assessment. I said, okay, who was involved in that? Well, it was me, the superintendent, a deputy soup, my assistant principals. I had the counselors involved in that. I said, you know what? That's great. That's amazing. I applaud you. Very, very good. How about your safety plan? Yes, same people did that. Yes, same people did that. All right, cool. That's awesome. Can I do your master schedule and your curriculum and instruction plan for next year? I'll do it for free. And they all looked at me and they said, well, are you qualified? I said, nope, not one bit, but neither are you. When you tell me that you're the one who did the risk assessment and created your safety and security plan, I'm saying, you know what? You just graded your own test. I've been doing this for 30 years and you've been teaching kids to read for 30 years. I bet you can teach a kid to read like nobody's business. But if you can tell me the difference between quantitative and qualitative risk in a school environment, I'll do this for free. And I got crickets, right? What did that do? Well, that basically set the stage for them saying, you know what, this gentleman is right. We need to know what we don't know, and we need to let the pros do the work, the people that have been doing this for decades, for the most secure enclaves in the world, and created the standards for this. And we need to let them in, and we need to work with them so that we can create a safe and secure environment for our treasures. And that right there opened up the door to a holistic security program, which started with a risk assessment. We downloaded the past guidelines because that's what they're going to use to show the school board that they're not shooting at the stars with rubber bands. They're not just wandering generalities making this up. It's written. There's something out there that helps us navigate this, right? These stormy waters, written by people who have done this for 20 plus years. And you can't do any of this holistic stuff we're talking about unless you have money. So we have to
Mhm.
look for the money. We have to position the school to get money. There are things that we put in place based on this that we can actually call holistic. And we take that and we put it into play and we start creating that environment. And it's done one layer at a time. Now, school districts say, where do we start with all these layers? Are we going to start putting the fence up? Well, our advice is based on the risk assessment, wherever your assets are is where you start. So the building is where we usually start. Securing the building, securing the doors to the building, and then choking that down to the classroom. Why? If you go to a bank, your bank has their assets in the vault. Sometimes that safe, the vault door, costs as much as the building itself. It's
Mhm.
threats times vulnerabilities times the assets you're protecting, the value of the assets you're protecting. So you always wrap your safety and security measures around the value of the assets. Well, our assets are in a classroom and our assets are priceless. There's no amount of money that can replace any of these precious treasures. So what we're doing is many schools are saying, oh, we're just going to keep those old 30-year-old doors, 40-year-old doors, and we're going to do other things out here. We're going to invest in these gunshot detection technologies and weapons detection and these things, which might play into that school's risk assessment, but it's not a foundational security component. The foundational
Yeah.
security components that every child deserves, that every teacher deserves to work under is access control, video surveillance, and alarm management. There was a position paper written by the National Council for School Safety Directors and by the National Council for School Facilities that says that exact same thing. I'm not making this up. It says foundational security first. Here's the two things that every school absolutely has to have: access control and a good working solid PA system for communications. And on top, that's your Lego set.
Mhm.
That's your Lego foundation. And after that, you start clipping the Legos on that communicate with everything. And now you have your holistic approach to security. You have your plans, your programs, and you have your eye on the funding necessary to make this happen. Many school boards did not
Mhm.
want that risk assessment to happen because if they knew where the risk was, now they had to do something about it. And they didn't think they had the funding or the resources necessary to do it. And in many cases, they're right, but the approach is wrong. Because if they would have they would have had meetings with their general counsel, they would have found out that, hey, once we do that risk assessment, and then we start applying for these grants, and then we have a program and a plan in place, and God forbid something were to happen, we can go and say we've done everything humanly possible to secure our school district. What we're lacking is the funding, which we applied for and did not get. And what we've tried to do is these measures right here as prevention and proactive prevention, right? Which is in many cases mental health, the ability to teach the instructors, the teachers, the administrators, mental health first aid, to recognize a child in crisis, recognize a child whose behaviors are dictating that they are in crisis or having some kind of trauma, and then doing an intervention program based on social emotional learning techniques, based on love, based on caring, instead of based on punishment. So there's so much involved here, as you can tell already. And when you talk about a holistic approach to a safety and security program, it takes the entire school district coming together, because now you have climate and culture, right? And the climate and culture
Hmm.
totally dictates what happens and how things transpire and progress from a see something, say something, do something standpoint. So we could probably go on with this for hours, but I just wanted to give you a little tiptoe through this and this territory here.
Definitely. And I did want to ask a quick question. It's a little more on the facilities side of things, but a lot of districts are dealing with deferred maintenance. And so I wanted to ask, when they're going through these tiers and doing their risk assessments, do you find that a lot of them find like more issues in deferred maintenance? Because you mentioned, the school building doors that might be older and they're working on getting weapon detection systems, but they still have those older doors.
So I'm gonna answer that question kind of and go sideways because of organizations like ACE, right?
Hmm.
And organizations like NCSF. So we are trying to get a combination risk assessment and facilities assessment, peanut butter and chocolate, and turn that into a Reese's peanut butter cup, because they go hand in hand, right? When you can go into your school district and have the table that I'm talking about, and around that table, you have all your directors. You have your facilities director, maintenance, operations director. Sometimes it's the same person, right? Sometimes it's three different people. Depends on the district you're at. But you're going to have your IT director, your safety director. You're going to have your band director, your athletics director. All of these directors are responsible for their own universe, right? They come to work every day and they know it like nobody else. They know everything that's going on. When you can combine the facilities assessment and the risk assessment and involve every one of these directors in that and come up with a master plan that says, hey, guess what? We have to secure every one of these doors, and they need these locks, they need these doors, frames, and hardware replaced. But in these cases, we need to replace the entire door. That door's 40 years old. It does us no good anymore. In fact, I can kick it and it will go, and there's no need to invest any more money in it. We need to replace this. It's a construction project. Let's do this. That's when you actually have a good go forward strategy and a plan of action with milestones that says, hey, the next bond election that we do, the next referendum that we do has to include all of this in it. And that's even a better way to get the voters involved to vote for your bond and your funding, is by involving them in that and showing them exactly how vulnerable these buildings are to the vulnerabilities that exist, to the threats that are out there, and the risk involved in operating the same way we've been operating in the past.
Hmm. Yeah, that collaboration between departments is so important so that everyone has, a designated role in the act of, if something did happen in the school district.
Absolutely.
And you spoke a little bit about community buy-in. So I wanted to ask, what are some steps that leaders can take to strengthen collaboration and trust, among their stakeholders and other community members?
So it is a wonderful event when you see a safety committee meeting at a school that's done on purpose, created on purpose, the way they're supposed to be, and you have members of the community involved in this. You have your chief of police, you have your sheriff, you have your head of EMS, right? You have your physicians in the community. your nurses, your head, the heads of all of these local organizations, your hospital CEO involved in this. Because now you have a well-oiled machine on the same page. And when an event does happen, everyone understands what they're supposed to do, right? Here's an example.
Hmm.
We've been talking about the buildings. We've been talking about the facilities. What about the traveling classroom? What about the school bus with 30 kids in it that doesn't have an SRO at every location, on every bus, that doesn't have a trained person in event de-escalation on board? What's usually there, God bless them, is a paraprofessional whose second career is a school bus driver, and they are trained how to get these children safely from point A to point B and back on a crowded road, on a busy street, and drive defensively and offensively and make sure that our kids get back safe. If you think they've taken prayer out of schools, think again and look at the principal in the morning praying when those buses go out that they come back safely, because that's what you'll see. That's how important this is.
Hmm.
So what does that mean? It means our buses leave and they go on public roads. Safety committee looks at this and says, okay, do our local law enforcement personnel know the bus routes? Do they understand where those buses are going? How many children are there? Where the children are coming from? Can they at least have an inside look at who's on that bus, what time that bus should be where, and if that bus does get lost or doesn't report, or something in that GPS system that bus has on it says that they've gone astray, how long will it take to respond to that? And how many will respond? And what will that response look like? Has it been practiced? Those are the types of things that when we involve the community really, really help. Outside of the risk assessment, which usually takes us into the community as well if we do it the right way, that right there is one of the most important things. How do you secure a football game? How do you secure a track meet, a Special Olympics? All of those have a piece of the community involved in them, and we have to make sure that we're taking that into consideration. And more than that, we have it written into our plans and our security plan.
That's why I also think it's really important that if it's possible to have a school safety committee, it really does make a big difference. I worked with a woman a few years ago, and I can't remember which district she was at, but she was the director of custodial services, and she was in charge of the school safety committee. And I got to see her come to the conference with her team, all from different departments, but they were all part of the school safety committee. And it was really cool just to see how they collaborated and worked together.
When that's all you have, that's a smart move, because if there's anyone who knows everything about that campus, the custodian. I mean, the custodian
Yeah.
is who you give the radios to when you really don't have the money necessary to put a school safety program in place. One of my first advisements is, how many custodians do you have at this campus? And they're usually 6 or 7. And so I'll say, give them a radio and give them a quarter an hour raise to be your safety monitor. And what you're going to do is you're going to tell them anything out of the ordinary, any anomaly that you can think of, you report it to your assistant principal, whoever you designate, right, as the point of contact for safety and security there, because they know who comes in first, who's an early bird that gets to the school first. They know who leaves last. They know who's dating who. They know everything. They know who drinks Dr. Pepper and who
They
drinks
do.
Coke. They know everything in that school. So it makes a lot of sense until you get the funding necessary and you're able to hire that person for that spot to do something like that. So I applaud that, in many different ways. But, there's so many,
Hmm.
so many things and so many positions in the school that you can look at that are already there that you can apply to this. And then the climate and the culture takes over. They say you've seen one school, you've seen one school. That's true. They're all different. So they call them independent school districts in Texas. They're independent, but all of them have some commonalities, and that's one of them.
Yeah, I have a little personal story. So I actually, my first job I think when I was 15 or 16, I was a janitor for the middle school in our community. And when I tell you the ins and outs, those custodians know the ins and outs. So I think, you made a really good point, like to have them involved, and they'd be more than happy to be involved. A lot of them like to help out and help out with
Yeah.
the football games and things like that.
And you look at the school nurse, right? So everybody says, school nurse, easy job, band-aids, thermometers. The truth is, since COVID, the role of the school nurse has changed tremendously, right? The school nurse is now
Mhm.
part of safe and healthy schools, right? You take that and you say, hey, what else can I learn from the school nurse? Well, that's where I came in. And I said, you know what? I need to know how this works. I saw them during COVID. I saw them running the vaccine clinics, running the prevention, running the PPE course, making sure that everybody got back to school the right way and we minimized infections. And now COVID, in my opinion, was more of a mental health crisis pandemic than it was a viral
Mhm.
pandemic, right? Because of everything that happened during that time. And we can get into that. That's a whole nother podcast, right? But if you look at the role of the school nurse and you look at the school nurse's office, it's now almost a safe haven for children in crisis, for students being bullied, right? For students who have some kind of trauma that need validation of who they are as a person and what they're worth, their self-worth. They go to the nurse's office. Here's a real-time story. So I was in a nurse's office, bought him donuts and coffee. We're talking about some of the things that are happening at the school. And in walks a kid, and he comes in and he says, nurse, I fell off my bike and I scraped up my arm. I don't want it to get infected. Can you put stuff on it? Nurses have healing hands, but they have healing words as well. So she says, yes, Timmy, let me look at it. Oh my gosh, are those shoes new? Those shoes are nice. They're so nice. Are those new? Yes, my grandma got them for me. I live with my grandma. She's so awesome. Oh, that's awesome. So those healing words help Timmy, let's call him, feel and feel like he's part of everything here, right? So the nurse puts the dressing on there and says what she's going to say and says, I need to see you tomorrow. Come back. I need to change this so it doesn't get infected. Okay, we'll see you. Bye. She looks at me and she says, hey, did you see that? I said, yeah, he's a cutter, huh? She goes, yeah, he's cutting. I said, wow. So what's the procedure? What's the process that you follow when you see that?
Yeah.
She said, we don't really have one. I said, wow. Okay. Again, you're on your own. You have to take things into your own hands. I said, what would you do if I wasn't here? She goes, I'd probably call, the assistant soup. I said, call him. Call Doc. I want to hear. I'll keep this, names have been changed to protect the innocent, right? She calls him, puts it on speaker and says, hey, Doc, Timmy was here. Boom. This is what happened. The first thing I heard from that speaker was, Timmy's a liar. Timmy lies. Don't believe him. He makes things up because he wants the attention. Don't pay any attention to him. You're wasting your time. I just looked at her and I said, hang up. I said, don't worry about it. So she hung up the phone and she goes, what? My hands are tied. What can I say? Not. I said, you're going to bring in the people that care. You're going to take this into your own hands and you're going to create your own system for this. You're going to write it up and you're going to present it. And you're not going to let this go by. He's a child in crisis. He's a
Mhm.
child with traumas. We're going to get to the bottom of it. Who here, like you, is the adults that care? So she brought in LMSW, one of the social workers. She brought in one of the diagnosticians, and they created their own little group and they did what they knew how to do. And the rest is history. It worked out. But what I'm getting at is this right here is where it starts. And if you have intervention early enough, you can get to the children in crisis before they even think about picking up a gun. People are talking about gun control in schools. This is the best type of gun control. It's creating an environment where students do not use violence to express their emotions, focusing on behaviors instead of on words, focusing on actions and behaviors, and then creating the intervention programs wrapped around this proven intervention programs as early as possible so that we can get to the root of that problem. Now, where do facilities come into that? It's a huge, huge, huge benefit when your facilities speak to that child, to those teachers, and it says, welcome. Your grass is manicured in the front. Your trees are trimmed. Everything looks spotless. Everything looks nice. It's a welcoming environment. My classrooms are painted the right color. Everything from a learning environment standpoint is conducive to learning, friendships, love, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Next to, at the very bottom tier, the basic needs next to eating, breathing, and sleeping. Safety is next. When a student and a teacher feel safe and secure at school, they learn more, they live more, they love more, they become self-aware, but also self-assured. Their self-confidence levels rise. And then everything above that just falls into place. It increases test scores. It's has been proven. It increases the ADA at a school, the daily attendance. That's how schools get paid. So everything really transfers from creating a safe and secure climate, culture, and environment. And that usually begins with the facilities, the air conditioning, right? The HVAC. All of that has to do with feeling comfortable and learning and having that culture of excellence.
I kind of just wanted to go back to the example you used of the school nurse. I'm just a little baffled that the assistant superintendent said that, because we see all the time on the news that things go unreported and they end up becoming something significantly worse. And I think that in theory, even if the student was having attention seeking behaviors, that still comes from trauma. Those behaviors still come from somewhere that they need to be addressed.
All of that goes back to training and the fact that if you go to a conference like AASA, American Association of School Administrators, and you have a choice of what sessions to attend, that's one thing. If you have a mandatory training that says in order to be a deputy superintendent, in order to be an administrator, in order to be a superintendent, a principal, because that's your campus, 1, 2, and 3. Those trainings right there are what educators embrace along with their PhD and their EdD. Bring these trainings into the fold because now it's just as important. And my friend Max Schachter says, I can't say it, but Max says it because he had a traumatic, tragic loss. His child was killed. Alex was killed in Parkland at the high school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Max is an amazing person. And his triumph after Alex was killed is going to the U.S. legislature and driving these programs so that it never happens again. And my hat's off to Max. I've always admired him and respected him for that. And Max says this. He says safety and security before education, because dead kids can't take tests, right? I've always held that in my head. I've always held that close because he's not wrong. You know, we have to bring that into the fold so that the educators understand how important it is to have that environment, that culture of safety and security. Imagine when you're on an airplane. Air travel, in my opinion, is the safest when it comes to educating their stakeholders on what to do. I took 3 airplanes the other day to get to Washington, D.C. And I think it was on budget air. And so these three airplanes, every single one of them, before the plane took off, showed me the safety rules. They pulled out, you know, they pulled out the card and said, here's what you need to know.
Did you pay attention?
I did for the first time in a long time, but they made me. The lady there say, hey, look at me. This is important. This is going to save your life. I said, wow, she cares, right? She's the teacher that cares. So she says, I said, oh, under the seat. That's where it is. Every time you fly, you get that same message until it's ingrained in your head, right? That's why it works. And what does that mean? It means if my plane goes down, I know how to survive now. I know where everything is. I know how to keep cool. I know where the exits are. They're marked, and she showed them to me. You know, I know I can't get thrown out of my seat if I have my seatbelt on. I know where the oxygen mask comes from. All of those things should be taken into a school district, and most of them are now, and they're shown how to survive if something, God forbid, were to happen in that school. Standard response protocols are being trained. There's programs and procedures like alert, and craze and all these different. I'm not saying which one is better than the next, but I am saying you fight like you train. And if you train these things in an organization with the first responders being able to get into the school rapidly, and I'm talking about access control with mobile credentials distributed to the first responders so that now their cell phone and their watch can get them in the school even during a school lockdown. And with pinpoint accuracy in the first responder door numbering system, your unified life safety system and your unified access video and alarm system, which we talked about in the very beginning, which every school should have, says enter the south side of the building, door number 3, take a right, and door number 16 is where the student is choking on a gumdrop, the math teacher is having a heart attack, or there's an active shooter. So all of these things are so important, And this orchestra that we're creating, woodwinds, brass, percussion, and the conductor is us, right? The conductor is the school safety
Mhm.
director, right? Who's not only conducting, but also training the superintendents and the school board on what they need to do in a layered and tiered approach, and showing them at the school board meetings, presenting, hey, we're a tier 2 school according to PASS. We need to become a tier 3 school. Based on the risk assessment, this is what we need to do. This is how much it's going to cost. And this is our projects for the summer. And you take that and you say, we've done everything humanly possible to secure our school district. This is where we're at. Now you have something, you have a leg to stand on. But more than that, everyone from the custodian to the superintendent is on the same sheet of music. That's how you create a holistic approach to security and safety in a school district.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing all of that. I think you made a really good analogy about the music composers and how everyone works together. Um, I did have one last question for you. We're seeing a lot of new trends in school safety and security. Obviously, I just had my episode with Beth Sanborn and we talked a lot about the hidden vapes, how they're changing up the vapes to look a lot more not like vapes, so they're harder to recognize. But what trends are you seeing in K-12 safety right now that either excite you or worry you?
I think so. I went to the Colorado School Safety Conference in Denver. The state of Colorado, as you know, has been through, my goodness, it's just been through so much since Columbine, right? I mean, you talk about, I don't even know them all. There's so many that have happened, right? Events there. But some of the major ones are, of course, Columbine in Douglas County, Arapahoe. The school the shooting at the theater. So much that I went there more to learn what's going on. They implemented a system called Safe to Tell. They were the first ones to implement that Safe to Tell program. See something, say something, do something. It works. And I think the other states have captured that and utilized it and used it in a system of their own. Some use Safe to Tell, some use their own version of it. But in that, they highlighted some of the organizations on the dark web that are recruiting school-aged children through chat rooms and things like Discord and those types of things. On the internet, you can be anybody you want. So they're looking for these children in crisis, these children that are saying things that match their profiles, and they're going in and they're recruiting them into their organizations, which include human trafficking. They include being drug mules. They include being parts of underground organizations that try to harm people and hate crimes committed by these organizations. I don't want to get into who they are or what they do. You can look into that yourself, but that really does scare me. It really was troubling to me. And I went to a session on these things. There's organizations out there that are preventing that, government organizations that are trying to prevent that. They know a lot about what's going on. I think my message is to parents out there, please be part of your child's world. Recognize the behaviors, but recognize their clothing, right? Recognize the words they're saying, because part of that is associating with those organizations, and part of that is wearing the clothing that they wear, which sends a message to others, a bad message that you're part of that organization and that you believe in the things that they believe in, which are totally horrible and could lead to them brainwashing you into doing something bad in your school. Right. So what do? Well, when your children come home from school and you're making them the peanut butter sandwich or pouring them that glass of milk, you say, how was your day? 4 words in a question. And you watch them and you look at their behaviors, you look at their body language. And if they put their head down and do, something like this, I don't want to talk about it. Please take that as a signal to intervene with love and kindness and become part of their world, because there may be something underlying there that you uncover and could mean the difference between life and death. There's a very, very small line of demarcation between homicide and suicide. And either one of those right there could be happening right under our nose and we don't know anything about it. So please get involved in a kind, loving type of way and ask your kid, how was your day? And be genuinely concerned and genuinely wanting to understand and hear the answer and listen. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you talk And when you do talk, understand it from their point of view, try to see things from their point of view, and make sure that you get the help you need from the professionals that you need. I'm not asking people to be therapists. I'm not asking a teacher to be a therapist, but they should understand mental health first aid, and they should understand how to recognize a child in crisis using TIROS. It's just trauma-informed, resiliency-oriented, and equity-focused systems. TIROES. Look it up, understand it, and make a difference, because the difference is us. We are the difference, right? And I'm talking we, I'm saying everybody that has anything to do with a school district. Don't expect a federal government agent to jump out of a plane in a parachute and land and fix everything and have a bundle of money to, no, it's not going to happen. That's a pipe dream. Don't expect the state to come in and intervene and say, hey, we're taking over the school, we're going to secure it. It's not going to happen. 26 years since Columbine, it hasn't happened. No, it's been a few years since Uvalde, still hasn't happened. Now we have auditors coming and knocking on our door, but it hasn't happened. It's up to us. And that's the message I want to put across today is it is up to us. Safety and security is local. We can make a difference. We have to understand it first. We have to embrace it. And then we have to absolutely care. Human error plays a huge part in why school shootings happen. And it belongs to complacency and apathy and practical drift. Look those things up. Complacency, apathy, and practical drift. We can change those things tomorrow. We just have to understand them and implement them. Elena, thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and share your experience. And I know this conversation will resonate with just so many leaders and parents that are navigating these challenges. And you brought up a really good point that almost every school safety director has told me the same thing. The parent involvement is so important. Asking your child how their day is, noticing what they're wearing, noticing, what buttons they're putting on their backpack. All of these little indicators are so important.
Absolutely.
In just, acknowledging the emotional state.
Yeah. And just remember, when a child has a bad home life, they stay at school. They get there first. They eat all their meals there. All their friends are there. All their, circle of loving people are there. When a child has a bad school life, they stay at home. They fake a tummy ache. They fake a headache. The absences rack up. It's data that doesn't get looked at too much, but all that data means something. When a child has a bad home life and a bad school life, then you have Uvalde, because there's nowhere to turn, nowhere to go, no adult that cares. You feel left out by yourself on your own. And that's when you reach for people that are outside of your circle, and it could be the wrong people. And the rest is just in the books.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to subscribe and share it with a colleague. I'm Alana Pinkley, your host, and we'll see you next time.